Christmas time wouldn't be complete without radically progressive professors trying to scrooge up the whole thing. Next on the Campus Roundup. Hello, I'm Dr. Duke, and this is the Campus Roundup at the College Fix. Our top story segment this week focuses on Scrooging the holidays. It seems as though university professors love this time of year, not because of the holiday, because of how they can criticize it. To talk more about this, we welcome Jennifer KABBANY, the editor of the College Fix. Jen, Merry Christmas and welcome aboard.
Merry Christmas. We say Merry Christmas around here.
Yes, we do. I'm glad you're here. Let's talk about it. You know, I love going back through the archives of the College Fix because over the years, you have documented some of the most absurd stories on the War on Christmas meme. Going back to 2012, great story, the War on Jesus. Universities nationwide snub criticize Christ, the survey finds. Talk about that article.
Yeah, so we looked at over 315 religious courses taught at secular universities across the nation. And what we found is they either ignore classes on Jesus altogether, or when they do offer a class on Jesus, they approach it from a very critical point of view. Meanwhile, on the flip side, they love offering classes on Buddhism, Islam, any of the ism religions out there, witchcraft even, shamanism. And yet Jesus, the most influential figure that ever walked the face of this earth, is either snubbed, ignored, or belittled in college classes, according to that survey that we did several years ago. But I have no doubt nothing much has changed since.
Well, I can underwrite that it hasn't changed. I just got through serendipitously. Just yesterday, I finished teaching a course on the Bible to English majors. And the course was half full with religious studies majors who left the religious studies program to take this class because they complained that they weren't really studying the Bible. They were getting feminist Bible and Marxist Bible. And when they read about the life of Christ, they were deconstructing everything, no historical context. So what was true 6 and 7 years ago is unfortunately still really true on college campuses. And, you know, we every year we sort of see this attack. And you've done great stories. We've seen at the College Fix, Jesus the Communist, or give us just a sense of your memory of what the stories are that again and again come up every time this year.
One of the most common is that professors try to allege that Jesus was a queer, and they love this topic. It's frequently found at universities across the nation, and it's really frustrating, but it doesn't seem to be losing any steam. They also like to, take on the topic of Jesus from a social justice standpoint and use his words to advance their activism, as opposed to simply just reading the words of the gospel straightforwardly and trying to determine the message therein.
Yeah, that's exactly right. And not just queering Jesus, which is a familiar topic, but now transgendering him too. There's a couple of articles were done in the last 6 months about the fact that Jesus was transcended gender, that he would have been today a transgender individual himself. But this has gone on for 2,000 years. Human political causes appropriating Jesus for their own rhetoric. But I think one of the great stories, one of the most alarming stories, I think, just a couple weeks old, we have a professor of psychology at the University of Minnesota Mankato. Eric Sprankle is his name. He's an associate professor of psychology at Minnesota State University in Mankato. And he tweeted, quote, that the Virgin Mary did not consent to being impregnated by God. Quote, an all-knowing, all-powerful deity. The virgin birth story is about a powerful deity impregnating a human teen. There is no definition of consent that would include that scenario. And then he ends it with the smug, happy holidays.
As Christians, we do believe that the Lord created space, time, and matter, and he knows the past, present, and future. And he certainly knew Mary would consent. But underscoring that, even in the Bible, there's a beautiful song and poem that she is quoted in Luke that talks about her exaltation and pleasure and the humbleness of being selected for the great honor of carrying the Son of God. So she confirms her consent later on in the chapter of Luke.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. The angel Gabriel doesn't tell her she's going to conceive a child. He asks her, and she consents. She utters that really remarkable phrase, "I am the handmaid of the Lord. Be it done to me as you say." It is absolute consent in the best possible way. You have, like you said, a sort of spiritual consent that we see emanating from the beginning of time and out of time. But this young woman actually vocalizes her consent. In fact, Eric Sprankle followed up when people started bombarding him with other tweets about how, indeed, you have the Magnificat, you have her own consent. Sprankle followed up his tweet with a second one, and it reads like this, quote, "The biblical God regularly punishes disobedience. The power difference, deity versus mortal, and the potential for violence for saying no negates Mary's yes." That's remarkable. He says, to put someone in this position is an unethical abuse of power at best and grossly predatory at worst. So we come back to the fact that whether or not, after saying that she couldn't consent, he now concedes that she did, but says she didn't have the right to consent because the power difference was too great between God and herself.
Well, this professor is putting his own humanistic viewpoint on the story of the Immaculate Conception. And so, I think it's kind of comical to even, consider him an expert on it in terms of his willingness to ignore the further comments of Mary saying that she is rejoiced by this, and the fact that, look, the Lord created the universe. I mean, you can't get more powerful than that. So it's not his fault. We didn't ask to be created, and we didn't ask for the universe to be created, but the Lord is the Lord, and he created it.
Yeah, what I appreciate about your remarks is your remarks are couched in a careful understanding of the breadth and the depth of the biblical stories. I'm always amused when you get professors like this who don't like the Bible, don't like Christianity, yet they feel that somehow because they're feminists, they're empowered to talk about stories they haven't studied. Not only is this a white male, let's play the university's own game. Not only is this a white male professor who is not trained in the least in biblical studies, who feels he has the right to opine, what I think is really interesting is he feels that he gets to speak for young girls. He gets to speak for women somehow, despite the fact that he is radically the other when it comes to feminist studies. He has no problem opining about the predatory nature of God and also the inability of Mary herself to express her own consent. He wants to take that away from her. Seems to me if we read his comments through a strictly feminist lens, he'd fail on that score as well.
It's just laughable, and it shows how out of touch professors are from teaching the gospel and understanding God and Christ. So I would recommend to any student who really wants to know about Jesus and the story of Mary, read the book of Luke, or read the chapters of the gospel, or read the whole Bible, really, because at the end of the day, it's a love story between a God who created the universe and a God who loves his creation and even died for it. So it's a very powerful message, and I hope students aren't learning it from their secular psychology professors at Minnesota State.
Well said. Love story indeed. Jennifer KABBANY, it is always a pleasure to talk with you. I really want to once again wish you and your family the very best at this Christmas time. Thanks for your great work over the last year.
Merry Christmas. You too.
It seems like the entire feminist movement, #MeToo, especially on college campuses, is all about consent. Consent, consent, consent. And you have a wonderful story in the Gospel of Luke, where the angel Gabriel makes a presentation to Mary, asks if she will be the vessel that brings the Son of God into the human world, and she consents. She consents in perhaps the most beautiful, poetic way anyone's ever consented, all through biblical time. And yet, for progressive radical professors, it's still not enough. They have to ignore the consent to push their own radical social justice narratives. I want to leave you at this Christmas time with just part of what Mary said in her beautiful Magnificat when she consented to be the vessel that brought Christ into the world. And here's her consent. "For behold, henceforth, all generations shall call me blessed, because he who is mighty has done great things for me, and holy is his name." That is consent and praise and glory to the God who blessed her. And may that same God bless you and all yours at this happy holiday time. And that does it for us this week. Be sure to stay up on all the latest news and information from the College Fix by joining us on all of our social media platforms. For the Campus Roundup, I'm Dr. Duke, and we'll see you next time.